You're listening to the Low Pressure Podcast, the podcast for skiers.
Presented by CMH Heli Skiing and Peak Performance.
Ethan Stone, welcome to the Low Pressure Podcast. Nice to see you again. It's been a while. It's been a couple days, couple long days. Cheers, man. Welcome to the Ski Lodge Engelberg Low Pressure Podcast Studios.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Mark. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So we've known each other for what, about 5 days?
Yeah, something like that since last week.
Yeah, it seems like a lot longer. We've gone through a lot. We've done a cross Europe road trip. I must first things first, thank you for allowing me to pin your brand new car on the Autobahn past 200 kilometers an hour. That was a very special life moment, a core memory for me.
with the German rap music blasting at the same time.
That's right, some German dance hall while you had a FaceTime with your family from home in the passenger seat. It's a memory I'll remember for a while. So a little context, we were just in the Czech Republic. First time I've ever been there, and we're at the Daniel Hell Hanka Invitational, which was just kind of like I will keep wanting to say rail jam, but it was more than a rail jam. Well, what would you
session?
Yeah,
this is my go-to word for that. It was a session.
Session, jump session, rail session. They had some really cool features built. And to be honest with you, like the culture for those tiny little mountains. You can even call it a mountain, those hills. Rural Czech ski slopes. Wild.
Yeah. I mean, we were really out in the boonies there, but that's always great to see, right? It's just a small place like that. All you need to do is just build I always say, if you build it, then they will come, and that's what Dan did out there. Built a really sick park, great features, invited some of his friends to come sesh it, and what more do you need, really? Yeah,
right. Like great riders, really, really great riders. And like just the community around the whole place was just really awesome. You had some night skiing. I haven't done night skiing in a long time. It's funny, I've been in Europe for about 10 days now. And the best skiing that I've done is night skiing on a little bump in the Czech Republic, which is like next to a cow farm.
Yeah, that was a blast. I'm really glad we did that. That was the best way that we could have spent our time that evening. I mean, we could have sat around listening to like techno and drink beer, but...
Well, I stuck around there was an AC/DC cover band.
Yeah.
Which was really great.
Yeah, and they were rad too.
Kudos to Dan for that. And they looked like Brian Johnson and Angus Young, the guitarist and the lead singer. Like full on, they played the part. Tons of people were there. It was right at the base of the jump. And then, it went straight into like, all right, let's go party, techno party. So I was like, I'm going to go skiing. And you're kind of on the fence for about 30 seconds. And you're like, yeah, no, I'll go too. And sure enough, then we got back and we were able to party with everybody. We just were able to skip about an hour of it. And then I felt great in the morning.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Those were some of the more memorable laps for me this year, too. Just ripping fast. I love that feeling. There's something different about night skiing. The snow was so grippy, like the edges just like bite in, especially because it was so slushy during the day. And just going fast, you have that like visibility. You have that cool air nipping at you. That was fun. That was
nice.
Good bonding experience for sure.
It was nice. Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't get to night ski very often. I think the last time I night skied was in Japan a bunch of years ago. Whistler doesn't have night skiing. They never have. I think because they just want to funnel people down into the village to spend some money and that's I think that's the reason. And then where I grew up down in Vancouver, there's 3 hills that just kind of hover above the city, Cypress, Grouse, and Seymour, and I did a little bit of night skiing there. And I've actually been talking about. That's as far as I've been getting, about doing like a double day, like a Whistler during the day, and then a night skiing down at one of the local North Vancouver resorts or hills. Maybe on a POW day, and then go to a POW day, like POW night skiing. I've done it once while I snowboarded in POW at night, and it was amazing. I kind of want to do like a night ski POW session. I think would be pretty rad.
Pow night skiing is amazing. I used to do it all the time at Mount Hood Ski Bowl. Up in Mount Hood, it's the first place that you pass when you're driving up through government camp. Small little place. I think it tops out at like 5,000 feet elevation. And when it is on there, it is on. And I've had nights that there's like one little double chair up upper bowl, and it just opens up like, what's the vertical there? Like, I don't know, maybe it's like 500 feet or something. But you can just blast laps all night long. It's usually not too busy. And there's been nights when it's like refilling after each lap, and you go up and you kind of dip into the woods, and it's a bowl, so the whole thing is kind of illuminated. And when it's on, it's on. Just whiskey drunk, just blasting laps until 10 p.m.
Drinking whiskey, skiing pow. So you're from Oregon.
I am from Oregon,
Great.
yeah.
All right, so we'll get to I want to hear your whole story. We talked about it a little bit in the car, and there was specific things I didn't ask you or I didn't want to know about because I was saving it for here. A lot of it has to do with Downddays. We haven't mentioned that you are the editor of Downddays.
Yeah, who is this random guy anyway? What is he doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're an influential person in European freeskiing.
I guess so.
All you journalists are the same, just humble and kind of in the background, but you have no idea how much power you probably have. You know how much power you wield.
I pull the strings behind.
Yeah, for real, right?
No, I am the editor of Downddays. Downddays is the European free ski platform. We can definitely talk about Downddays a little bit. But first and foremost, I am a fan of skiing in general, and that's what has brought me to where I'm at now, I guess.
All right, so where you started, Oregon.
Yeah.
So we'll get to it, but you're from Oregon, but you've been living in Europe for 20 years. Let's go through that process.
Yeah, for sure. That's a long process, I guess, but
we got a long time, man. We got tons of time.
We got all afternoon, man. I'm from Oregon, from the West Coast, and to kind of condense the story, I came out here. So I was studying German in high school, just for fun. The high school that I went to, you could take 3 different languages. You could take Spanish, which was the most practical. Basically, everyone else took French, if you could. And then German was for the real weirdos, like if you wanted to be totally different than everyone else, you took German. And so, of course, I took German in school. And then when I was in college, there was a foreign language requirement. So I was doing German in college and decided to do a study abroad in Munich for a year, and came over here and basically fell in love with the Alps. Also with a German woman. That's a different story. But
her name's not Alps.
Her name is not Alps. But I was totally blown away by the mountains here and the ski culture. I mean, you've seen it yourself. It's just a little bit different from North America. Yeah.
It's so different. Like just being here in Engelberg the last couple days. Like I said, unfortunately, the snow's terrible. But it hasn't really stopped me from. I'm in travel mode rather than in ski travel mode, it seems. Like I went up for a couple laps the other day with a bunch of the Freeride World Tour crew that are here. I skied a solo day today, just exploring the mountain, and it's so huge and just immense is, I think, the word, right? I was skiing Whistler with the Ski the East guys came out to Whistler last week, and that first day they're like, "Whoa, this place is huge, and this is big," and I come here, and I was like, I sound like those guys. I'm like, look how big this place is. This is wild.
Yeah. Yeah, the scale is just something else. I mean, first off, there's the vertical where the valleys are just so deep, and so you go from valley up, and the mountains aren't that high, comparatively. Like they top out at around 3,000 meters, most of them, but it's the vertical drop into the valleys is huge, and there's just I remember going to ski resorts that nobody has ever heard of outside of like Austria or somewhere, and it being like fantastic, bombastic skiing. If this resort was in North America, it would be like a free ride mecca, and no one's ever heard of it. And in Austria, it's considered like a family resort.
Right.
And when I went to a couple places like that, I just realized that like this place is insane. I need to spend some time here and see what it's all about. And then there's just the culture of the mountains too. People have been living and skiing these mountains for hundreds of years, and it's just such a cultural experience. And then of course obviously it's just vast. You just go to some of these resorts and you can literally take lifts all the way through the valley into the next valley, maybe into the next country. You could literally, if you pack light, you can take a trip and you can go from town to town with ski lifts through like half of Austria, it feels like. And that's just an amazing thing. So coming from Oregon, we have like there's a mountain and there's a ski resort, and then there's like another mountain over here and maybe another ski resort, and it's all spread out. And so just seeing this interconnected range and the cultures that are spread through it was really incredible. And I wanted to come and spend one winter here and kind of check it out. And that was 12 years ago, and I'm still here. So the Alps worked their charms, I guess.
Yeah, it's cool. It's something that I wish I would have explored more before now, but no better time than the present, right? But it's funny that you mentioned there's so many of those zones. Like I went to the biggest place I think I've ever been to last time I was here in Flaine in France. And you're like, Flaine, I never heard of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
really?
exactly.
It's so big. But there's so many places like that. And it's like, there's really no... That's why I think there's that mystique about BC is because it's so huge and nobody's been to any of it. Do you know what I mean? It's so untouched. Whereas here, it's so big, but there's thousands of years of humanity that's just occupied all these little spots, right?
Yeah.
Like coming to this big, massive resort, there's so much infrastructure here, but you look down from the gondola at the town and it just looks like a little mountainous, picturesque European Swiss town, right? There's a couple hotels in the valley and a few little houses kind of scattered around, and you're like, there should be more for this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in some places there is more. There are the towns that are well known that have kind of gotten built up over the years, but a lot of the development, I guess, is fairly recent. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that places like Verbier was just a sleepy little mountain town with a couple farmers and a couple sheep, and then with the advent of the alpine tourism and building all the ski resorts, it really picked up pretty fast. But I mean, a lot of these places they're still little villages, more or less, that have had more or less success with building a ski resort and building a couple hotels and kind of take it from there. But I mean, I could have gone anywhere. I could have gone up to BC and had probably a similar experience. I mean, the mountains there are fantastic too. The skiing experience is incredible. And I guess if you just imagine interior BC and give it 500 years of people kind of working their way up into those valleys and building towns at the base of every resort. And that's the good and the bad thing about the Alps is it's very civilized. It's very difficult to get to some place that is truly wild. You can ski off the back of some mountain into a backcountry zone and or go to somewhere where you think that no one else is, and there's all of a sudden there's just a bar on the top of the mountain or something,
right. And a train station.
Yeah, exactly. They played a joke on the German alpinist Reinhold Messner a couple of years. He was climbing a mountain somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but they played a prank on him and they dropped off a little kiosk, a newspaper stand at the top of the mountain. And when he got to the top of the mountain, there was just the newspaper stand there, and there was a guy hey, you need anything? You want a candy bar? It's what the hell's going on?
Yeah, it's super cool, man. And it's always nice being here. It's funny what you were mentioning, the interior BC in 500 years, what it could look like. And I was thinking about the towns that are established, like Revy and Golden, Kimberley, Fernie, those kind of towns. It's kind of the same. It's like BC's version of that, I guess. But they're different because we're at Hotel Engelberg, the ski lodge in Engelberg where we are now. Train station is literally right there. I can see it out the window.
Yeah.
And if I look this way, the mountain is right there. So everything is there. It's not it doesn't seem to be uber developed right next to the mountain, which is strange because I guess the town was there first, and then they put the mountain in. So those are, I guess, some kind of differences. And then with Golden and Revy, the mountain, you got to drive like 14 kilometers up the hill, right? You got to kind of go from here to there because none of the mountains really start right in the valley.
Yeah, that's a huge difference, and the accessibility of everything here is just insane. Like if you've been to Chamonix, you can ski lines that anywhere else in the world, would involve like a serious expedition even to get there. And you can wake up late in your bed and drink a coffee and jump onto the lift up the Aiguille de Midi and ski a line and be back at your house at 11 a.m. and drink second coffee of the day, skiing something that was like legitimately insane.
Permanent closure in North America for good, right?
Yeah, and not just the lifts themselves, but just the public transportation and the access and the diversity too is one of the amazing things of the Alps, where you can almost always get good snow. This season is a little bit of an exception. It's a pretty bad season for snow. But normally, if it's bad on the north side of the Alps, it's good on the south side of the Alps. So you jump in the train or jump in the car, and in 4 hours, you're in Italy, and the weather is entirely different, and there might be good snow. If it's bad on the east side in Austria, you head to the west, maybe 4 or 6 hours, you're in France. The snow is totally different. And the Alps tend to get hit by different systems, whether it's from the north or from the west or from the south. And if it's bad where you're at, you just jump on the train, and in 4 hours, it's somewhere totally different.
It's so awesome. I was talking to someone yesterday about, so we drove from the Czech Republic back through Germany on the Autobahn to basically to Engelberg here to Switzerland. And I was like, it's a pretty big day, 9-hour day. They're like, whoa, that's a huge day. I'm like, it's pretty normal. That's pretty much like, we drove for 6 hours yesterday. I'm exhausted. I'm like, dude, you can't even get to like the next big mountain from where I live in 6 hours. Today I tweeted out, the best part about Europe is the bread. And Drew Tabke, former FWT guy, tweeted back, now it's the trains and the trams. And I was like, ooh, that's a good comparison. I don't know. And then I was like,
the bread's pretty good too.
Eat bread on the train and the tram.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
But the trains and the trams are amazing here, because at home it's like, all right, cool, I gotta get to Revelstoke. What's a 7.5 hour drive? That's it. You don't take a train, you can't really fly, you can't do anything, you gotta drive. Mm-hmm. Right? Whereas here, we're in the Czech Republic thinking about coming back. I'm like, oh, do I get a ride to Prague and then fly and then take a train, or do I drive all the way, or do I take a train all the way? Like, the options are awesome as a comparison.
Absolutely. There's so many options. It's pretty affordable, kind of. The trains have been getting more expensive lately, but there's like discount bus lines. Shout out Flixbus. Like, you can get anywhere for like 20 euros. But it's interesting, the cultural differences, because people from North America are totally used to jumping in the car and just driving for 12 hours. Like, that's nothing, like, oh, I got to get from Oregon to Salt Lake or going to Colorado, that's something else. And here, there's just so much, it's so much more compact that the idea of like driving 2 hours to a European is an entirely different construct than it is to
kids. Like, ruins their day when they find out they got to go 2 hours. You're like, what are you talking about?
2 hours is a big journey. It's like, okay, this is a haul. Like, we got to get ready, and then people will drive 2 hours in the U.S. without even thinking about it.
People drive that far to work.
Yeah.
They spend 2 hours a day in their car going to work and back.
This is mind-blowing to me, but probably a decent number of these people are listening to this podcast while they're sitting in the car, so shout out to the commuters out there.
Absolutely.
Find a job closer to home, man. Like, what are you doing?
I hope you get some POW on your vacation. Thanks for listening to the Low Pressure Podcast. I love you. All right, well, let's get back to, so you left Oregon, came here, you're like, all right, I'm staying. You did your one season. And then what did you end up doing for work? Did you were able to continue your visa? Like, how did that, like, as an American who doesn't have German citizenship or European citizenship, how did you manage to continue to stay here?
Yeah, so I needed to get a visa in order to stay longer than 3 months. And I got a visa through my employer, which was a company called Schneestern.
Say again?
Schneestern. The
snow something?
Mm-hmm, snow star is what it means in German. I told the founder way back when, I said, this no one who speaks English can pronounce this name.
Schneester.
Schneestern, yeah.
Stern.
Stern, means star, yeah, snow star. They're based out of southern Germany, and they came in and basically took over the snowpark game in Europe. And I had some park building experience in the U.S., and they're always looking for, they call them shapers over here. Back home they call them park crew, but here they're
shapers too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, diggers.
Diggers, shapers. They're always looking for someone to run their parks. And so I got a job with them and I got started at 2 different glaciers in Austria that they run. One is called Countertal, and the other one is called Stubaii.
Stubaii.
Stubaii has gotten pretty big the last couple of years as sort of a destination for training in the fall and in the spring. But there's a great glacier ski skiing in Austria overall. I think there's 6 or 8 different glaciers where you can ski. They have a preseason that starts in October, and then the spring season runs into May. Most of them close down pretty early, actually, for various reasons. But
do some of them, like I hear, roll out like a cover?
Yeah, exactly. The reason that many of them close down is basically ecological or environmental, and they're trying to save the glaciers, and they will roll out these huge white, I think it's kind of like a fleece substance basically, and they're insulating the glacier. They might push up together piles of snow, and they're trying,
and reflect the sun back too,
exactly,
right?
Reflect the sun off and just protect the ice. And I mean, the issue is that in 20 years, most of these glaciers are going to be gone.
Yeah, we've seen that in the Horseman Glacier in Whistler, where they do momentum, and where they used to do Camp of Champions, no longer Camp of Champions. You can't even build that line anymore where they were set up. And then they've actually taken the T-bar out because the T-bar it's too steep at the end now. You can't take the T-bar out. But momentum, I think maybe if they're coming back this year, but I think maybe 5 years if they're lucky.
Yeah, the writing's on the wall for all of these companies, and I think they're all looking, if you're running a business of that size too, you got to look 20 years ahead and see where your business is going to be at. And they are all considering their options, basically. And I mean, that was an interesting role for me too, being up there building snow parks on these same glaciers. And I mean, we're up there, there's a ton of work that goes into these snow parks, and you can't imagine how much diesel gets burned on a daily basis to maintain
just with the groomers and stuff.
Just the groomers, but I mean, we're up there with diggers, like digging into the ice to shape like the jump line and whatnot. And I worked for this company for several years, and I enjoyed it. They build fantastic parks. I was able to travel a lot, see different places, but there were moments when I was up there like drilling into the heart of like a millennia old glacier so that I can set a down rail, and I'm like, oh, what are we doing here exactly, But that part aside, it was a very cool job to see different snow parks in the Alps. You travel a lot, and they basically get contracts to build snow parks all across the Alps. And so I got to see a bunch of different places, and they do some major projects like the Nines, which is one of the standout snow park events of the year. And they build a bunch of stuff now, like the World Cups and the Olympic slopestyle courses, and they're the best. They brought snowpark design up to German standards, which is
interesting. So you did that for, you said like 3 years or so?
I did that, probably about 5 years all in all, and it's a great job in the industry, making pretty good money, traveling around. And then eventually I sort of transitioned into the media side of things. I came from a media background when I was working in the U.S. as well. And I always knew that I sort of wanted to transition back into that at some point.
What were you doing in the U.S.?
Let's see. Well, I've been writing.
Is that what you went to school for?
I got a degree in English literature. And I'd just been writing and basically doing journalism since I was in my teens. I got my start at the local newspaper in Twin Falls, Idaho, back in the day.
You lived in Idaho as well?
I lived in Idaho as well. I bounced around a little bit when I was younger. Born in Eastern Oregon, moved to Idaho, Spent a lot of my youth in Idaho. Spent a couple years in Michigan too. That's where you learn how to ski park and hit rails.
There's nothing else to do
in the Midwest.
Yeah.
But when I was living in Idaho, I think I was 15, 16 years old, and I got a job at the local newspaper in the sports department and the sports section, and they needed someone to answer the phone in the evenings when the high school coaches called in the scores from the football games and the volleyball games and the basketball games. And you take down the scores from the coaches, you take down the stats, and then you write a little blurb. The Bruins clobbered the Raptors 78-53, and write one little paragraph, and then it shows up in the paper the next day of all the high school games.
Al Bundy scores 4 touchdowns in a single game. That sort of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I got started off doing that, and then was writing for the local paper and continued in journalism when I got to university. And I was working for newschoolers.com way back in the day.
Before you moved to Germany?
Yeah.
Working for Schmuck?
Schmuck took over the job that I created.
Oh, really?
He was my successor, yeah.
No way. I thought it was the other way around. It's just, that's what you think with Jeff Schmuck. So you're working straight up for Bishop in the early days.
Not even for Bishop, but for Matt Harvey.
Matt, okay.
The guy who started New Schoolers way back in the day. This is
like Facebook. People don't realize that New Schoolers was basically like social media before social media.
Yeah.
It was like Facebook before Facebook.
They were early adopters for sure. This was before Facebook. This was probably like MySpace era, I guess.
Yeah.
But I was the first news editor of New Schoolers back in the day. This would be like the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And you had this community of several thousand people who were stoked about skiing. And I came in and saw that there was opportunity to create a news program that would basically cover the planet. Was kind of the idea. Is just if there's a skiing event going on somewhere that's cool, and this was at the time when free skiing was really growing and exploding, and anything that happened was totally new and cool. And so say, hey, there's something going on in Australia next week, and there was probably a New Schoolers member that was there. Take some pictures, write us a story, and we put it online.
That's awesome. That kind of balanced out the shit talk in the forums. At that time, it was rampant.
Yes, well, it still is.
Did you spend much time on the New Schooler forums?
I do not anymore. When I was a kid, I basically grew up on the forums and made a lot of connections that are still valuable to me today. Nowadays, when I go back, I'm like, oh God, it's just a bunch of 15-year-old edgelords, and then people tell me it always was. But I guess I kind of grew out of it.
They're all 30 now.
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully most of them have moved on with maybe a couple prominent exceptions. But I drop in every once in a while to see who's shit-talking who, and certainly a great venue for that.
Keep your finger on the pulse. So you're kind of running the show, would you say?
Yeah, for a couple of years there, I was basically running the news program. Obviously, there were other people who were actually running the site itself. I just had a small remote part of it, but I was working together with Matt Harvey and another guy who was doing the coding. Bishop was involved, of course, and this is way back in the early days of New Schoolers. I went from there. I did some internships at Freeskier magazine in the summer. I was working for Patrick Crawford. He was the editor at that time. This is like 2005, 2006. And so I had a media background, basically. And I sort of had an epiphany when I was in my early 20s. I was writing a lot about skiing and producing stories and writing for magazines. And I realized that I really don't know anything. There's the background of all these things and the actual people on the mountain making these things happen, and how the companies work, and how an event works, and how a ski resort works, and how a ski gets made, and the history of these places. I really didn't know anything. And at that point I realized, hey, I should probably just move to a mountain and work the mountain jobs and get really embedded in the culture and experience what it's actually like to live full-time in a mountain town and be involved in the life of the mountain. So that was how I got into snow park shaping, basically.
I love how you chose snow park shaping.
Well,
You just so eloquently and beautifully described the desire to learn everything that's involved with this beautiful sport that we have. You're like, I'm choosing snow park shaping. I love
it took me a couple of years to get to the park. I mean, I started off in the rental shop, doing setting dins for newcomers and
set my dins at 13. No, legally I can't do that.
Yeah, and people with their feet in the wrong ski boots, and people who come in and they say, I can't, these bindings are broken, and of course it's in the lock position.
Heel pieces up.
Yeah. Okay. I started in the rental shop. I went up to Mount Hood and worked up there for several years. I was in the rental shop. I sold tickets. I cleaned the toilets at Timberline Lodge. Did a bunch of different things, and kind of park crew is a very desired job, obviously, and so it took me a couple of years before I got in there.
You pay your dues, man.
Yeah, exactly. Paid my dues.
So did you park crew in Oregon before you got, and that's how you got in easily with the park crew in Germany?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did a couple winters up at Timberline Lodge. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to tell the Germans, I'm an American park shaper, know what I'm doing, and which I didn't really. But
yeah, and he speaks German too.
That definitely was a big help. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So that's where that's the history. That's where your love comes from. That's where you felt like you needed to. That's how you decided this is how I'm going to be involved. And during all this time, you're gaining all this information. And now you're like, all right, I've done the new schoolers thing. I've paid my dues, cleaning toilets, building park stuff, learning a bit more, writing about it here and there. How did all of that turn into working at Downddays?
Yeah, so...
And first of all, give us a little, like an overview of what Downddays is. I know what it is. A lot of course skiers do. But a big part of my market, or the people that listen to this show, people that are sitting in their cars right now, are North Americans, right? And we don't really get a lot of Downddays stuff. We get the occasional thing here and there.
Yeah.
Like we have our core culture points, or hubs, so to speak. Like there's the TGR forums, there's new schoolers, et cetera, et cetera. But you're basically focused with Europe.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, Downddays is a pan-European English language free ski platform. It was founded in 2008 by 4 guys in Innsbruck, Austria, who, this was around the time that free skiing was really starting to come over to Europe and become a thing over here. People were doing it earlier, obviously, but there was kind of a wave back in like the 2000s when it really started to pick up steam in the old world, I guess, of skiing. And it was around that time that these guys wanted to create basically a free ski platform that was here in Europe. So they started it back in 2008. It turned into a website and a magazine that they ran for several years before I got involved. When I got involved, I had been over here for a couple of years, and I was also still working as a journalist. Like I'd sell stories back to North America, basically. When there was a cool ski event going on, I would go as a freelancer, and it made sense for an outlet like Powder for Freeskier. If there was, I could say, hey, there's something cool going on in the Austrian Alps, and I can send you a story, and I'm already here. And it obviously was way more practical for them to hire me than to send somebody over from North America.
Right.
So I was already still doing the media gig, and basically met up with the Downdays guys at one of those I actually, it was Red Bull Line Catcher.
Oh, for real?
In Les Arcs.
I miss those.
France.
I miss Red Bull Line Catcher.
That was a fantastic event. That was 2015. I think I met these guys for the first time. And I was on assignment for Freeskier there, taking pictures and writing a story. And the Downdays guys were there covering it as well. Hit it off with the editor at that time. His name is Mark Von Roy, a New Zealand guy who is also based in Innsbruck. And we went out on a down day and skied Powder together and had a blast. And I guess that's how you always hit it off. Just like we were skiing at the...
little night skiing, right?
Night skiing,
I would have preferred it was backcountry POW, but still. But equally as good. Like, I'm in the Czech Republic, skiing nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I connected with those guys, and they were looking for people who had my skill set. So ended up...
So they're like, dude, just start writing for us.
More or less, yeah. And just sort of ended up doing a bit of work for them, and a bit of work became a little bit more work, and then they needed an English language editor, and took on that job, and then they needed an editor-in-chief, and I took that on, and then they needed a co-owner, and I took that on. And
so you just skipped through a lot of steps. So they a co-owner. So there were the 4 guys that said we're kind of co-owners of it. Has anybody dropped out or dropped off or sold their shares now that you've moved into that role?
Yeah, almost everyone dropped out, actually. That's almost a different story, but basically the original Downdays team, which was Klaus Polzer, Nico Zacek, Christoph Thaler, and Ben Burnett. Shout out to these guys for getting the whole thing started. What they began as Downdays grew into basically a creative agency in Innsbruck. It's called The Distillery now. And
they're PR for the Nines, right?
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
they run the whole Nines, actually. Not just the PR, but the whole shebang. They do a bunch of stuff, and more or less their company grew out of the realization that when you're in media, you end up doing a lot of creative work for your clients, and there's quite a bit of money and opportunity in doing that. And they figured out pretty quickly that actually, we can do better as a creative agency than as a little dinky freeski magazine. So they grew out of Downdays and grew into the Distillery. They're doing fantastic these days. They have a great thing going, but Downdays kind of fell by the wayside, and at a certain point they basically didn't want to run the magazine anymore. And at that point...
so it started as a magazine.
It started as a website.
It evolved into a magazine?
And within the first 2 years, they produced a magazine. I believe it might be the first magazine here, which if you're watching on video, you'll be able to see. But podcast guys, you're out of luck. But this here, I think, was the first magazine that they made, the Downdays Freeski Journal, back in 2010.
And it's huge.
Yeah, that was, I think, the photo book there.
How many of these did they put out a year?
Let's see, for a long time, I think it was around 4 or 5 issues a year.
This big?
Mm-hmm.
This is massive.
Yeah.
This is huge, man.
Back then, it might have been like 3 a year, but it varied throughout the years. They went through a lot of different format, from selling in newsstands to subscriber to basically a free magazine. And obviously, as most people will know, there's been a lot of shifts and changes in the print publishing industry in the past 10 years.
Yeah, a lot of shifts, a lot of adjustments, right? So it started off, you said webzine, like a website, web hub, and then picked up into the magazine. Magazine kind of shifted into...
Magazine shifted into the book, which is what we've been doing now for 3 years. We call it Ski Stories.
Which is this one here, if you're watching.
Mm-hmm.
On here, it's a little hardcover, really nice hardcover book. With
Exactly.
what, like 10 like long-form stories?
Yeah, exactly. There's 12 long-form stories in there. It's about 168 pages, I believe. And we replaced the magazine with the book because we know that there's still a place for this high-quality print publishing. And I think that most passionate skiers really appreciate that when you've got it in your hand and it's a fantastic photo that someone worked really hard to create and traveled far and bought a whole bunch of equipment. And the issue these days is that so often you will see that photo on a tiny little screen at 1080 pixels wide, and you look at it for 3 seconds and you swipe away. And it's something that costs someone maybe $10,000 to produce and years of experience to create, and that appreciation is sometimes a little lacking in the digital environment.
So disposable, right? Like just flipping and opening this, like for the 10 seconds while you were talking, I saw a photo of a dude in artificial light smashing POW, and I'm like, he's in Japan skiing night POW, like we just talked about. Sure enough, And I'm like, oh, I want to open this magazine because it's nice to have something in your hand, right?
Let's just cut the podcast. We'll just look at old magazines.
Yeah, we'll put out a bonus. We'll put out a bonus video, and it'll just be us like reading ski magazines. I've kind of, since I started the podcast, I've kind of drifted away from consumption of ski media, including magazines and those sort of things, because I'm so involved in it that I kind of need a break, but I still like it. I don't consume as much as I have. I have every powder magazine from 98 till I think like a year, like I think the year before it went out. I think the last year where it stopped, I stopped subscribing. I did buy the last issue. The last issue. So that's where the world's going, right? But it's nice to have that tangible product in your hand. It's nice to feel. It's nice to smell the paper. It's nice to be able to go back to it and look at it, right? I don't know how many people save photos on their Instagram so they can go back and look at them again. You usually have to go and be like, oh, I remember a photo. Who was that person? I got to go to their account and then scroll, do all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
It's that I like. I know what you mean. So you've decided to kind of focus a little bit more on quality.
Exactly. Basically, more or less, the magazine business model has gone defunct to a large extent. Obviously, It's changing. It's not gone, and people are adapting to it in a variety of different ways. But most magazines were funded by advertising spending, and the advertisers have gone elsewhere. They've moved into digital. They've moved into different things, and no one was buying these expensive ad pages that the magazines were selling in order to produce, basically. So our magazine wasn't really working out anymore. We knew that we still wanted to continue with a high quality print publishing, and we've always put a lot of love into every print product that we make. And so we decided to go for this yearbook concept. We've been doing it for 3 years, and it is absolutely a labor of love.
Now, is it a compilation of stories that have been either on the site, or is it just, are you curating these specifically for this one book?
It's curated specifically for the one book. So we basically, throughout the course of a winter, will be, keeping our ears peeled for any cool stuff that's going on, whether it's a big film project or an interesting trip. And so we'll basically plan out the book throughout the course of a season, and we spend the summer producing it, and then it comes out in the fall. And
so how hard is it for you to not, like, you go to these events, so say, are you going to be writing a story about the Daniel Hanka Invitational that we went to?
I will be.
Potentially. So
it should be online today, but I haven't done it yet. So
because you're here. So let's just use that for an example, right?
Yeah.
Say you're going to write a story like from an event like that for this book. Mm-hmm. Would you just be holding that back, or would you still be pumping out images and bits and pieces about that event? Obviously, just the basics through the website, but would you be holding the meat for something like this down the road? And how hard is it to not just be like, let's put it out, to actually sit on some really excellent content? I hate calling this content, even though that it is.
It is content, and that's a great question, because that's always a very difficult decision to make. And a lot of times on the fly, we will be trying to make a decision. Oh, I'm going to go to this event next week, and I think that it could be an option, depending on how everything turns out, how good the photos are, that this could be something for the book, basically. And then in the course of that event, we say, oh yeah, this was freaking rad. Like, that should definitely be in the book, or maybe not. But either way, you want to have your content on all platforms. And so even if it is going to go in the book, you still want a story on the website. You still want to be pushing photos and videos out onto Instagram and everything else.
Now, are you putting out stuff? Obviously, you're putting out stories and things while it happened. Are you saving things so that you can then be like, all right, this week we're going to promote this story from the book, so you can revisit some of the stuff that you maybe saved?
Yeah, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. There was a long time where people would save the best stuff for print, obviously, and definitely some people are still doing this. On the other hand, nowadays I know a lot of photographers who are just push their stuff straight out on social media and say, you know what, I shot an awesome image, here it is the next day. And the attention spans are so fast these days, and it's also different media, that if I put, you know, a bunch of amazing shots on our website tomorrow, and then I print it in the book 6 months from now, there are going to be some purists who are like, oh, I already saw this, you know. But honestly, that's like, you know, that's a fraction of the people who have seen it already. And
right.
Even if you saw it, maybe you forgot it already. Or even if you didn't forget it, seeing it in a different format is an entirely different experience.
And maybe it's one of those photos that deserves to be seen more than once, right? People watch movies over and over and over and over again. People get posters like this one we have above us here from local Oscar Inander. I moved that there because I'm like, that's way better than it was hanging before, and I really like this. I might actually buy that poster. I like looking at it a lot. That's what I think is missing with the Instagram thing, like we were talking to, where this comes in. It becomes extremely valuable. I was always wondering, you know, Instagram started off as a photo app, right? You could share your photos, and I really liked seeing those photos, and
that's true.
Evolved into what it is today. And I wonder if there is value, once again, for a new photo app of some kind that focuses on photographers or focuses on images that are special, that aren't just super consumable. I wonder if that's something that can be done again, or if it's just going to evolve into, you know, dancing to the same song that you've heard a million times already.
Well, for the kids these days, apparently Instagram's already dead and gone. You know, buried in there with your grandma on Facebook because TikTok is where it's at these days, and videos, and it's an interesting proposition there with the still images, but definitely photography has lost a lot of its original power just with the advent of video in general.
I think it still holds the power. It just has been drowned out. You know what I mean? Like, I can still walk by an image and be stopped in my tracks and be like, wow.
Yeah. Right?
But I can also probably get caught scrolling through that really quick based on the format that it's in. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It'd be interesting.
You know, one thing that I have realized in my work in this field over the years is that you always need the images, and you don't realize what you need until you need it. Like, there's a lot of video shoots going on, productions going on, where afterwards they say, "Oh, we need this still image," you know, and nobody took that picture because they were too busy filming or too busy getting the TikTok or whatever, you know. But okay, I need this still image, and there's a lot of value in that for brands, and also just for people, you know. There's a real power in a still image, and it's great to see that still goes on in a certain context. And with the print publishing that we do each year, it's super important for us to provide a platform for that to exist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up cutting magazines apart and taking the pictures and putting them on my wall, you know, which maybe you did the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a bulletin board somewhere in a box, and it's a picture I cut out of Powder magazine, and it's a dude with this massive pack skiing this kind of probably wide open couloir straight down to the ocean. Super deep, Pow. And I just put that on my bulletin board. I looked at that photo every day for probably 6 or 7 years through high school. I can remember it as clear as day right now. Mm. And that photo, I was talking to someone about wanting to go ski in Scandinavia, like Norway, or do like the fjord, you know, sail through the fjord, ski from the peak to the ocean, that sort of thing. And that, I guarantee you, was influenced by that photo that's just buried somewhere back in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think it's important. I wonder if I'd really like to. That's why I like having photographers on the show. They're like my favorite people to have on the show, just as their views on creativity are always different. Their ideas on how everything from how they produce their art to how they distribute it, I find like really fascinating. And I think moving forward, I'm going to try and find a way to help distribute their images, whether it's selling prints or creating some sort of a link or something. I think there's a missing place for that, is to highlight really, really high quality, excellent images. Like I was mentioning before, Instagram used to be able to see all of these things. Now it gets lost in the junk. Sure. Whereas just to simplify it into something like, you see something like this. Have you seen those picture frame TVs?
Yeah.
My brother,
where it'll display the images like in a...
Yeah. So my brother, I went to his place earlier this winter, and he has one, and he's got this just amazing photo above the fireplace. I'm like, that's really cool. And the next time I went to his house, it was this crazy lion with like sun flare and golden light and just beautiful flowing mane. I'm like, that's a cool photo. And then I went back to his house the next time. It was in winter time, and it was this glorious, just soft, like a high alpine mountainscape with snow-covered trees, and I was like, wait a minute, did you get a new, because they never had the TV on when I was there. I'm like, did you get a new photo? They're like, no, it's the TV. And I was like, what? So it's a screen that can display all these images, and you can put them on a loop, or you can just keep it as a single image, which I thought was really, really cool, because it kind of combines the two, still photography, but then you can also add, just turn it off and watch the hockey game, but then go back to it. And instead of just seeing just a lame black screen, you can actually do something with it, like for this, I think, which is really cool. So I don't know, maybe there's a place for it. Maybe someone smarter and more smarter than me and more connected and more ambitious can figure something out like that.
Well, you're doing a great job just by getting photographers onto the podcast, and most of these guys will have their own websites and their own web shops, and just by giving them a little bit of exposure, that's probably helping.
I think our goal, we have a new website coming. I think the goal is to have a specific page for the photographers that have been on the show, to be able to just go to the website and click and be like, oh, cool. There's Guy Fatale, there's Oscar Anander, there's Blake Jorgensen, there's Jordan Manley, there's Ulrich Longhat. I can't ever say his last name. Lunghunger? Yeah, right? Whomever it is. And then just give an opportunity for them to just go boom. Like, Ruben Krabba, Andrew Strain. Like, there's so many. Lee Cohen's, the Paul Morrisons of the world, right?
Mm-hmm. There's so many, and these guys have dedicated so much to capturing these images. It's so much time and expertise and equipment and days spent out. It's really fascinating.
I agree. Are you a photographer yourself?
I am, yeah. I shoot for Downdays, and have had photos published in several different publications. I always say that I'm a writer who can take pictures, basically. So.
Yeah, I'm a podcaster who takes pictures because exactly they have to. They're like, "Are you a photographer?" I'm like, "Well, I have a camera."
Yeah. Well, everyone's a photographer these days. If you snap a photo on your phone, you're a photographer.
And they're amazing.
They really are.
Maybe you'd know this answer. So I asked someone this the other day. I think I was asking Guy this. Has there been a photo published, like a cover shot, on a magazine or publication, that's been shot with an iPhone or with a smartphone?
National Geographic.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm. A couple of years back, I can't remember what the image was, but I remember the story that this is like the first cover photo shot on an iPhone. I have to look and see. Pull that up, Jamie.
It's a Joe Rogan reference. I can't afford it, Jamie.
I can't remember what the image was, but yeah, it's been done, and I mean the quality is absolutely there. I've been on photo shoots where I was the photographer several times, where I'm working really hard to get my shot. Obviously, I'm carrying around a bunch of lenses and cameras.
And the guy standing behind you?
Exactly. The guy standing behind me, and then I look at the image that he shot, and I'm like, oh, dude, what am I even doing
How
here?
often does that happen, right? Like I've done that a bunch of times.
This happens way more than I would like to admit. Now obviously, with a modern professional camera, there's a lot more factors and variables that you can control with what you can do. But it's getting crazy how well a phone can imitate a lot of that stuff.
Right, and it also does come down to how you're able to use that phone, right? Sometimes you get lucky with a point and click, but it's the same thing as using a camera. Like you could do what I do, as I've said this recently on the podcast. You just set it to the auto setting that you're looking for: mountain, landscape, running guy, action, flower, macro. Like you can just set it up. But if you know how a camera works or how to do that sort of stuff, even that little bit of knowledge will look way better than if someone's just pointing
absolutely.
and shooting, right? You can point and shoot, but if you know a little bit about light or angles, it can be completely different.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the photographer and never the equipment. A good photographer can take a great image with a potato, and a bad photographer, you can give them all the equipment in the world, and they're not going to produce a good image. So,
Fair enough. All right, so moving on with the Downddays. So, what are kind of your daily tasks? Like, is the primary the online presence? And also explain a little bit more. So you said before you used to have several. You told me in the car on the drive here, you used to have several different languages through Downdays.
Yeah, we used to operate. We ran a website as well as the magazine in 3 different languages. Everything was in English and French and in German. There were a couple years when the magazine was in Italian as well.
And you're printing all of these in all these languages?
Yeah, exactly. We'd print in 3 different languages, and of course it was just a ton of work. Everything you do, you have to do it 3 times over, basically.
And you got to hire people for all those things, right? Like you said, you were doing the German translation. Is that correct?
I was the English editor, and so I would translate things from German into English. I don't speak French, so there were things that would be written in French, and we'd need to find a translator to do that. So yeah, you got to find a translator to translate everything. I mean, there would be articles that would be produced in one language or the other, and you got to basically the book would get to be the magazine would get put together mostly in English, and then more or less you translate it into all the different languages.
Do you still get people submitting stories now in French or in other languages that you get to translate into either the book or onto the website?
Yeah, definitely. On occasion, we will get stuff submitted in different language. Usually, it might be like a French guy who produced something in French, and then he will translate it himself. Or have someone translate it and send it to us.
And try and make a few extra bucks with the same story, but
exactly.
For a different market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do quite a lot of that. And I mean, it's one of the challenges of the space that we operate in is that English is a second language for everybody who is involved with Downdays and who's reading Downdays as well. And that's something to keep in mind, too, when we produce this beautiful book that, okay, you can write in the most flowing and gorgeous prose ever, but if the guy reading it doesn't understand it, then what's the point? So it's not like we dumb it down, but it's something that you keep in mind, that everyone involved it has to be understandable for everyone. Is
right.
Basically the point.
Right.
But it's a super interesting space for us to work in. We did do multiple languages for many years, and it was just basically too time-consuming and a real hassle, where if you were providing event coverage or doing anything that needed to happen on a quick timetable, something would get written in one language and then it needed to get into the other languages, within a day or two's time, and it was just a very stressful and time-consuming and ultimately too expensive operation. So
right. So you decided you're going to focus in on the English language stuff. Was there little blowback? Like, has there been replacements in those other languages? Because you basically cater to the free skiing scene in Europe, the English language free skiing hub, right? You're that.
That's what we try to be. There wasn't blowback per se, but there are media titles in all of these countries as well too. Germany has their own ski magazine. Switzerland's got their ski magazines. France, Sweden, Italy, they all have their own titles, which are more or less focused on free skiing. And our goal was always to unite the whole thing together. The way that I always explain it to people is if you go to free riding or you go to the snow park in any resort in Austria right now, you're probably going to be riding with a couple Austrian guys, and then there's going to be the Swedish kid there, and there's going to be the Italian dude, and everyone's speaking in English with each other. And that's basically our target market.
It's everybody's second language, but everybody speaks that second language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we wanted to be able to bring everyone together. Now, when we switched to just English, obviously we lost a lot of people who, I mean, you can imagine if you're just going to pull up a website and read some news from the day, you're going to do it in your native language. You know, it's not easy to go to a foreign language website and say, I'm going to read the news today in French just because, you know, like very few people who don't speak, you know, fantastic French do that.
Right.
And so I think that we ran into some natural boundaries there. With French specifically, I know that we lost a large part of the market when we stopped publishing in French. But we want to communicate in English to the people who can understand it. And I think that we do have a small core of people that still read us and are still.
Where's kind of your main markets then? Is like big in the UK? Like, is it based here, like around Switzerland and Austria?
Mm-hmm. It's basically most in the Alps. Innsbruck is our traditional home, and so Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, France, Scandinavians all speak great English, so we get a lot of clicks from there. The UK as well. And then as the world has become increasingly global too, we do get a lot of traffic from North America.
Yeah, what kind of percentage do you get from North America tuning into that stuff?
Off the top of my head, it's probably maybe like 15-20%.
Yeah, that's fun. That's about what I get from a North American of my European. Mm-hmm. My European readership or listenership is about the same, about 20%. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's English language, and it doesn't matter to someone if they're coming to Downdays or to New Schoolers, as long as the content is good.
Yeah. And how they relate to that content, right? Can I relate to this guy? Can I relate to this people? Yeah, can I relate to this area that they're skiing in or what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. And I wonder now that, you know, COVID restrictions are starting to drop, if people are really if people have started to explore more, like North Americans, more Downday stuff, Europeans, more, you know, North American outlets, and if that's really going to explode travel once again. Like, just being here, I know I'm like, wow, I miss this, right? But it's interesting to see how many things we didn't expect were going to happen over COVID. Everyone moving back to their own homes, everybody kind of reconnecting. Like, I was talking to someone the other day, he's from Perth. He's like, yeah, everybody, like millions of people moved back to Perth. I don't know the number. I'm butchering the stats, obviously. I'm paraphrasing. But so many people moved back home that housing is crazy. And it's happened in a lot of places because people are like, oh, I can live at home now. So I wonder if while they're at home sitting on their computers, consuming all this content, reading about what's happening over here, what's going on over there, if there's going to be like a major travel boom.
I wouldn't be surprised if once this whole COVID thing is over, if it ever will be, that there is like a major surge in travel. But it's a super interesting topic. I mean, for me, for many years, skiing and travel were like totally intertwined, like inextricably entwined, where it's like, oh yeah, I want to go to a new country and I want to ski there and I want to experience the culture there. For you is probably similar, you know. I'm doing it right now, man. You keep like a little tally of countries in the back of your head, like, oh yeah, I went to Austria, I went to France.
I went to the Czech Republic last week.
Exactly. Boom, check it off, you know. And that
was a nice unintentional plan.
Hey, that was totally unintentional. Yeah. But you know, it was a means of traveling the world, and not just because of COVID. That whole lifestyle, I think, has really been put in question, obviously, because of the climate crisis, too, where there's, you know, people say, hey, you know, you don't need to fly to Japan. You know, you can ski your backyard. And at the end of the day, the experience that you have is not necessarily the snow and not necessarily the mountains, but the people you're with and what you're doing, you know. And specifically through COVID, so many more people, I think, have realized that too, that skiing, and we've brought it in our books too over the past several years, that hey, you know, it's not about where you're going to. You don't need to go heli-skiing in Alaska. Yeah, you can, and it's probably radical. It's probably still on my list of things to do, but you don't need to do that. You know, you can go on a tour in your backyard with your buddies on a couple fresh inches, and that's a great experience, and that's what those experiences are what matter at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And I think that the whole tourism market in general has been shifting to accept and understand that this is the way that the trend has been going. And I think it's really interesting too, because you know, there's a lot of like smaller places that have been forgotten and have been left aside in this big tourism boom, where you get these huge mega resorts which are drawing in tens of hundreds of thousands of people, like, oh, well, you got to go there, you know. And then there's the little mom and pop shop or the valley over,
like we were talking about earlier. Yeah,
that just didn't get the attention. And these like regional tourism, I know in Switzerland, they like the first summer of COVID, they had the best year for tourism that they ever had within Switzerland, with all these little places, because it used to be everyone would take off and go to Timbuktu for the summer or go on their vacation somewhere crazy. And now they said, you know what, we're going to drive up, we're going to go back to that place where we used to go as kids, you know. And these places have experienced a little bit of a revival. And I think that that's interesting to see the tourism industry be not so focused on massive mass tourism, but rather really local, regional tourism. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely one effect of COVID, and the climate is really the elephant in the room too, as far as all that's concerned.
It's been a weird year, man. There's been no terrible snow pretty much everywhere except for like a handful of places. We having this conversation at breakfast today. Ora in Sweden has actually been pretty good.
Yeah.
I just got off.
Norway's been good.
Yeah, up northern Scandinavia. Japan has been getting absolutely hammered on. No one knows about it because no one's there right now.
Don't tell me this. I don't want to know.
I've heard some unbelievable stories of like nuclear winter. They've basically taken all of everyone's snow. And then I was talking to someone today, and apparently I've seen a few crews head over there this year, but Georgia, like Bulgaria, Georgia, like the Eastern Balkans, that kind of zone, has been getting some really great snow this year as well. So it's interesting. But everywhere else, it seems to be pretty terrible.
As far as exotic travel locations go, here in Europe, people love to go over there to the east, to the Balkans, Southeast Europe, Greece, Turkey. Georgia is apparently Alaska-like with a lot of the stuff, the mountains and the snow that it gets. So.
Have you been?
I have not been myself. No, it's on that checklist.
If you go next year, let me know. Let's plan a trip.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned for the Downddays LPP Georgia collab, as long as we're still able to go to that country by that time.
But yeah, all that bickering aside about like staying local, I mean, it's fun to go somewhere new and to explore something and to realize that there's great skiing in Turkey. You know, who knew? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Do you get a chance to like travel as much as you can to all these different places? Like, do you still, like you said, you've been here a long time. I lived in BC my whole life, and there's still places I haven't been to in BC because I'm like, oh, it's snowing there? Well, it's snowing where I'm at now. You know, it's hard to, it's like that thing when you see your friends, when you go visit a place, you see the friends in that place more often than you see the friends at home because you make a point because you're going there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So are you making a point of like trying to go to all of these little zones? Is there a place every couple of years that kind of piques your interest? And you're like, I'm going to go to this spot. Because in Europe, like you said, there's so many little zones and they're all developed a little bit more than, say, in BC, even though the terrain is massive, but there's no infrastructure. Whereas here you can be like, I went to a great little resort in Greece, like you just said, or Turkey.
Sure, yeah. I have been to many different places. And like I said earlier, that was always a focus of mine, was to like get a new country. You know, like, okay, let's go to Bulgaria, Bansko. Like, what's there? Let's go. Let's check it out. And I did a fair amount of that when I was younger, and I'm sure that I still will do more of that in the future. It's become a lot less, though. It seems like it's a motivation for. I don't know if it's someone younger or someone more immature or what it is exactly, but yeah, you want to see the world. You want to go everywhere. You want to see everything, you know? And for me personally, over the years, I've lost a little bit that motivation. Like I've skied a lot of places. I've seen a lot of places. And at a certain point, you say, well, maybe that's enough, you know? And you do realize that, hey, that mountain in my backyard could be just as good, you know? I don't need to go somewhere else to have it as good. And you also realize over time that there is nearly like infinite complexity, like especially in the Alps and in nearly any mountain. Every valley is different, you know? And every hill is different. Every contour is different. And it's different on every day, too, like throughout the whole season. And you could spend, you know, even where I live, like in a little Swiss valley, like you could spend every day, you could ski like a different valley. I could spend my whole life skiing probably within like a 50-kilometer radius, you know, and I would not need to go further than that. And I still would not see everything, you know?
Right.
And when you start to realize that there's that like depth and diversity of what's available to you just in one space, you don't need to travel. But of course, you don't know that until you do travel too, you know. So right. It's like it's a double-edged sword.
There's something to be said about each side, right? There's the culture, and that's new, but also I know this, but this is new.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of personally in that phase where I've always kind of been in that phase. It kind of goes in waves, where I'm really fired up about ski travel, seeing new things, doing stuff like this in hotel rooms and getting interviews done. And
here we are, man, in Engelberg in the Swiss Alps. This is a ski mecca in Europe.
In this hotel, which is quite possibly one of the coolest places I've ever stayed.
Shout out, Ski Lodge, Engelberg. Boom.
Ski Lodge, Engelberg. And what did you say downstairs? Something about it, like just the energy and the hub of like.
Oh yeah, you know, I came here after Corona. There was the first winter. A lot of stuff was shut down. I wasn't traveling at all. I spent most of the year at home. And then in the spring, I came with a couple friends, and we came here. And I'd been struggling a lot with my work because I was missing the culture. I was missing the feeling of, like, being with a group of guys together, and you're in this, and you're feeling the vibe. And I'd really been missing that. And when you're sitting at home, working from home, sitting on a computer all day, it's really kind of hard to, like, feel like you're connected into something. And we came up here to Engelberg, and we came to Ski Lodge, Engelberg. And it's one of those places where you feel ski culture like coming out of the walls. Like this is a place where you can live that scene and that vibe. And there's people from around the world who come here to feel that. And obviously the mountain is unreal. And so this is a special place for skiing. And there's a couple places like this, but it's like a nexus.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny that the way you just described that almost contradicts what you were just talking about. I don't really need to travel that much anymore. And I was like, but it's like you got to balance all of those things in your life. You got to balance all those desires, all those feelings. Sometimes you just want to chill. Sometimes you need to explore.
You know, it's true. It is a contradiction. And I mean, that feeling, too, is subjective. And I think I mentioned it before too. I think it's the people more than anything. You know, if you've got people who you ski with and you've got a crew, then it doesn't matter where you are. Like that, the people is the most important thing. When I was working the first years for Schneestern, I ran the winter park on the Stubaii Glacier. People know Stubaii. They have a big park in the fall and in the spring, and in the winter they have a tiny little park. It's mostly for tourists in the wintertime. There's not like pros coming up there training in the park, and they want to keep a little park there just from like basically December, January, February, March. They have this little park that the kids can roll through and hit a couple little jumps and stuff. And I was up there on my own. I was the only guy in the park. I would work with one snowcat driver who would get sent to me daily from just the driver's pool, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was up there by myself the whole winter long. And I would ski, we had great POW days, and I'd go out and I would ski incredible powder days, like unforgettable, unreal, untracked, by myself, up on the glacier, just loving it. And then I would come home and I would sit in my room afterwards, and it was like it never happened.
Right.
Because I didn't have anyone to share it
Right.
with. And it was such a weird feeling that I realized, hey, that it really is true that happiness is only real when shared,
Is that, you think, maybe an underlying reason why you do what you do? Is you basically, your job is to share that experience with as many people as possible?
Absolutely. I think so. I struggle sometimes with my job and what I do. I'm like, we're just writing about skiing. Like, seems like maybe there could be more valuable things to do in life, but there is a pure joy involved in skiing and with sharing that with other people. And if I can make someone happy and I can make someone stoked by reading a story or seeing a picture and feeling that excitement, and then they end up going on the mountain and have a day like that with some friends, like, that's pure and that's real, and people need that. So
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably the best possible place to end this conversation. Thanks for coming, man.
Hey, thank you so much.
I've had a really great time spending many hours with you in the last week, and looking forward to many more.
Yeah, let's go hit the Autobahn again.
Oh, dude,
anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to use your brand new car and hit over 200 kilometers an hour, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to Skoda.
Yeah. Sponsored by Skoda. Right on. All right, tell people where they can go check out Down. So most of my viewers are Canada, USA citizens, United States citizens. So maybe they're missing a whole segment of the ski community, which you're curating. So where do they find it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to check out what we're doing, you can always go to Downdays.eu is our website, and we're on all social media platforms. Some people have probably seen us on Instagram before. It's Downdays_EU. If you want to check out our books, it's shop.downdays.eu. Mm-hmm. And basically just put in Downddays into any your platform of your choice, and hopefully we will be there.
Awesome. And thanks Ski Lodge Engelberg, which there's actually a big story about that and all the Swedes that are here.
Yep.
I honestly think, I feel like I'm in Sweden, to be honest, the amount of people that work here and that are here from Sweden, but I don't mind it because Swedes are cool.
This is a little Swedish enclave here.
Yeah, right.
And there we got the story of how that came about in the book.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, man. Pleasure.
All right. Check it out. So we'll see you guys next time.
Mm-hmm. So long, guys.
Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Low Pressure Podcast, the podcast for skiers. This has been a Redmark Media production.